Alrighty, after learning all of the pen commands, the shape tool should be a walk in the park for you. It is underneath the path selection and direct selection tool in the tool panel. If you click on it, you'll notice there's quite a few different shapes in here. Let's start with the rectangle tool, and up in the tool control bar you have the same controls that we saw for the pen tool. So this should be familiar territory for you by now. Let's set it to shape so that it will create a new shape layer in the panel, in the layers panel, and begin by clicking and dragging. So I have mine set to a fill color, and every time I click and drag I'm going to get a new shape. So like we did once upon a time with the pen tool as we were tracing the letter green, the the word green, we can create a hole in one of these by first off making sure we're on the right layer. Let's go for this big one, and then changing the path operations to exclude overlapping shapes, and we can create a hole or a window in that object. Just like any of the other vector tools that we've worked with, this is made up of points and paths. So if I grab my pen tool and command click on one of these corners, my points become available, and I can command click and drag those to affect them. I can delete a single point. I can convert a point. So all of those still work in these tools. Adding a point, that too, if I'm on the right path. Here we go. Adding it. Alright, let's get rid of those 3 layers and switch to the next one. Rounded rectangle tool. This one is a rectangle that has rounded edges, and the amount of roundness to your edges is affected up here in the radius panel, in the radius box in the tool control panel. There we go. And I'm going to set mine to 20. When I click and drag, it has rounded edges. And no matter how big I click and drag this object, those edges stay the same. Once I let go and it's created my shape, if I want to transform this larger, those edges will transform larger. They've just become a normal set path at that point. Now unfortunately there's not a way to retroactively change the corner radius size on a shape that is already made. If I want to have larger rounded corners than this, I literally just have to delete that shape layer, change my radius size, and create a new shape. Let's look at a couple more of the options in the path operations spot. So Photoshop will default at any given time to the new layer option here. If you delete shapes and end up on your background, this is where it will go. You can combine shapes so that you have them all on a single shape layer. So if I wanted to do something like this and have them look like they were all one piece, I would overlap those with the setting on combine shapes, and then when I click off of that shape layer, it'll look like it's a solid object. Let's delete that one too. So watch, as I delete this one, my setting up here goes back to new layer, which is just fine. Ellipse tool, same thing. Polygon tool, that's got some fun settings on it. So a polygon tool has flat sides, and you can set the sides up here. Let's start with 3, which would be a triangle. If you click and drag, there's a triangle. This is one of the few that is set to be perfectly proportional. You can't actually change if it's a long triangle or a short squat one. And again, once you've created this shape, you can't retroactively go back in and change it to have more sides. You can just delete it and create a new one. If you set the side number to 5, you can click the little gear that's next to that and choose one or more of these options. I'm going to choose star. That means that they will become indented and I have a star shape. If I also come in here and say smooth corners, I'm going to have a marshmallowy star shape. And if I crank up my sides, I'm going to have one with more and more sides. You can also affect how deep the indent is on these in this setting. So indent sides by 50% right now. Let's do that at 25% and see what the difference is. And then also that last option in there is if we smooth the indent, so this should give us kind of a wavy gear shaped object. The line tool is the next in the shape tool lineup, and if you select that, it does have mostly the same controls that we've seen before. If you click and drag, it will create a line, and if you're on set to shape, it will create a shape layer. This isn't just a fill and a stroke though, it's actually also a weight. So right now it's at a 1 point, and if I change that to, let's say, 10 points, then you can see that it is a wider object, and you can better see that there is actually a fill and a stroke on this because that's what the shape is set to do. If you want to make a perfectly horizontal line, hold down Shift when you click and drag. If you head up or down, it will lock it into that. It'll also lock in at a 45-degree angle, so holding Shift will keep it at those regular angles. This one has a fairly nifty trick to it that I only recently discovered. It has some settings where you could add things to the tip, like arrowheads. So if you want an arrowhead at the start, like you're doing a here, look at this, you can click and create an arrowhead. So that's under the little gear settings. There's also one for the end. So those could be potentially quite useful. I was fairly pleased to find those. Moving on to the next one, we have the Custom Shape tool. The Custom Shape tool enables you to open and load and save libraries of vector shapes that have been created either by someone else or by you. If you click on the little drop down in the Custom Shape toolbar, then you can see several different shapes. Now yours might not be the same as mine. I've loaded some different from the original default. Like with your brushes and with styles, see the little gear control in the upper right corner? If you click on that, it will let you upload some other standards from Photoshop like frames. Let's see what those are. Clicking append will just add them to the bottom of the list. So here's some fairly ugly frame, Photoshop. One of these days I'm going to get a job designing for Photoshop and this stuff is going to get way cooler. How about that for a goal in life? You can add to this with your own custom shapes by simply creating a shape and then saving it. So I am going to grab a rectangle tool, and I think I'm going to turn this to path for now. Remember, turning it to path will create a path in your paths layer but not in your layers panel. And just for an example, I'll create a text talk bubble like I've seen in some advertisements recently. So I have my rectangle, it's got a point at all four corners. I'm going to come in here and with my pen tool selected, command click on it to make it active, and then I need to break into this, so I'm going to add a couple of points, and actually instead of breaking it I'm going to add a third point in the middle and then click drag that down, and option click on it to get rid of those corners, and then hold down the convert to do my Bezier handles. So there's a bunch of different ways you could do that. I'm just making a shape that we can quickly load. To save a shape, you need to have the point selected. So grab your pen tool, hold down command, and then click and drag around the shapes that you want to save as your new custom shape. Switch to the Custom Shape tool so we can see how this works. Oh, my points disappeared. I'm going to do that again. Command click, select these. Don't switch to your custom shape. Just go up to Edit and choose Define Custom Shape. So you don't actually need to be in the Custom Shape tool to make this work. You'll see this box. It looks fairly familiar. You can give it a name and click OK. And now when you go to your Custom Shape tool, in the drop down it will be the last one in there. Once you've made a bunch of shapes and you want to save them, you can come into this drop down and edit using your preset manager. So click on the little gear, go to preset manager, and you see the same thing we've seen in brushes and styles, where you can command click on multiple items and save them as a set, or you can also delete and rearrange in here to your heart's content. And when you are happy with the results, click done. Also, like brushes and like any other set type of thing in Photoshop, there are many of these out there that you can find to either purchase or to find and download free. If you go to Google and just look up Photoshop shape, and then I would type in free, you'll come across a whole bunch of stuff. And I believe I have also linked to some of these in our resource folder. So flourishes, all sorts of stuff. DeviantArt.com is where I tend to go to find high quality brushes and shapes and things to download, but honestly I make quite a bit myself and use those frequently. So if it's a shape you're going to use once, there's not much point in making it into a save shape. But if you are creating a whole bunch of things that need the same shape, then go right ahead. It's a useful thing to have. The last area of the shapes that I want to go over is using them to put type on a spread. So I'm going to first off create a circular shape, and it will be filled with color. So I'm going to go to shape, and I will turn my stroke off and just create a round shape. And if I wanted to put type around the edge of this, all I have to do is grab my type tool and click over the path, and you'll notice as your cursor goes over that path, it changes again to where you can click either on the line, it's got a little dotted line through it, or you can click inside the shape. Let's click inside the shape first. And I'm going to change my type color so we can see this. There it is. And this will be restrained inside that shape. So if I make this quite a bit smaller in font size, and then I'm going to paste in the lorem ipsum that Photoshop has by going to type and paste lorem ipsum, you can see that this is kept to the shape of this circle. So kind of as I've been saying through this whole time, Photoshop's first language is not vector, and the programs that are vector programs like Illustrator and InDesign have much more editability when it comes to creating type in a shape. But this is good for kind of a rough go. It's just like when you do type on a path and you can double click it over here as your layer to keep affecting it. You'll notice in your paths panel, now that you're aware of it, anytime you're on something like this, the temporary path for that object will show up. So if I click on my ellipse, the one that's showing up is the ellipse. If I click on my type, the one that's showing up, it is the type. The reason it's got the lorem ipsum blah 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 in here is because type layers automatically are named with the text that they are being typed with. So I'm going to go back in my history to where I didn't have type in this tool, or in this shape. There we go. And this time I'm going to put type around the edge of this circle. So this is something you will probably run into fairly frequently, that you need to put type around an object. You can create a free path with your pen tool, but you can also use a shape tool with either where it will create a shape layer or just the path. So I've got my type tool and I'm hovering over the path. If I click once, then I can type. Now that's pretty small, you probably can't see what it is, so I'm going to adjust my type size. This is something when you're working on something like this, you should probably have your type panels open. So I'm going to go grab my character panel. That gives me a little bit more control over what this type is doing. Now this is sitting right on the line of that circle. To make that change, as long as I'm on the type layer, I can affect the base shift, and in the character panel, that's this one right here, and if I click and drag on that word, it will increase the amount, and that will move it away from the object, because usually having type right up against a solid color shape does not look very good. The other thing to know is that if you click inside your type, and then you will notice that there are a couple of spots. So right here I've got a little diamond, and then there's another circle that showed up here. If you hold down Command and kind of move around, at some point you're going to see your cursor get a little black arrow by it. If you click when that happens, you can control where your type is. So I'm dragging to the right and it's rotating my type around the circle. If I drag across that path to where I'm on the inside, then I have type on the inside of my circle. So that's what's causing that to flip inside. Now you'll notice as I come around here that some of my type is disappearing. That's because the end of the type is right here. So where you see your type disappearing, you can also hold down Command and affect that end as well. So this is kind of a little fiddly thing, and it might take you a little bit of practice, but that is how that works. Now say you've got this situation and you want the type to be on the bottom side of the circle without being upside down. So we've dealt with that situation, but now it's inside the circle. How would you get it back out? Well, that would be over here in your character box again. So the shift base, the last time we did it, moved the type higher above the baseline, but if we go to the left and go into the negative numbers, it will move the type below the baseline, and that will put it again outside of the circle. This is quite a bit of fun. I would recommend playing with it. The crazier the shape gets, the weirder the type gets. So usually, if I'm putting type outside a shape, most often it's a circle or an ellipse, something that isn't going to do really funky things to my type. That is pretty much it for shapes. They act a lot like a pixel layer for a lot of things. You can actually add styles to these if you want. Bevel embossing, drop shadow, texture, whatever it is that you're working on. Just keep in mind these are not actually pixel layers, and you can always change their size and you won't lose any image quality. Yay, vectors!